Hello, and welcome to this lecture for Unit 2 on the political and religious conflicts in the Age of Reformation. We've already talked about the war between Charles V and the Schmalkaldic League and his fights with the French and the Ottomans. We're going to kind of see those conflicts expand and become civil wars in parts of Europe, and we're going to see war more or less broaden in this period. One thing I want to point out is on this slide. You've seen this painting before, most likely. It's again Northern Renaissance painting from the 1560s. Peter Bruegel the Elder's The Triumph of Death. Again, one of my favorite paintings from this period. Really cool, but it also shows you just how preoccupied Europe was with death and destruction. You just see death all around. Old ancient Roman death, new modern warfare, plague-based deaths. You just see death everywhere, and it comes for everyone. Again, which is a common theme, from the 1400s onward into the 1600s, and they kind of chill out a bit with that theme. But I want you just to keep in mind that living back in Europe in this time, your position in society was very precarious. You could be taken out at any moment. You could be backstabbed, killed, a victim of a giant war, just doing your daily job of farming, and then all of a sudden be captured and killed, taken as hostage, executed by a foreign army. You could catch the plague. So there's really nothing keeping you safe and secure in the long run. You could be victim to death at any moment. Again, average lifespan was much lower, and just because you were living a normal life one day doesn't mean you could be swept up in a giant war that could consume you and your whole village and destroy your nation. There is nothing keeping you really safe. So this period is super chaotic and super hectic. Again, from like throughout the 1500s, honestly, and into 1648, you kind of just see massive amounts of death and warfare in and across Europe. Not everywhere. There are some breaks and some respites, but for the most part, everyone was really curious about war. This is going to set the stage for next unit. Next unit, we're going to talk about the age of absolutism and why were people so willing to accept people like King Louis XIV, the Sun King, and other absolute monarchs, because these monarchs offered stability and safety. And it kind of goes back to some of what Machiavelli said. Do whatever you can to keep your country and yourself safe and secure. Even if that means being a treacherous, evil ruler, so be it. So why are these people willing to accept absolutism and rule? Because it kept them safe and secure. So keep that in mind as we kind of talk about these topics over these next couple of lectures and into the next unit. All right, so let's look at the French Civil War first. Really interesting piece of European history, at least in my opinion it is. So looking at the middle 1500s, 1550 to 1600, this lasts for, several decades and into the 1600s and sets the stage for the 30 Years' War, beginning in 1618, which France eventually gets involved with. So previously we did talk about the Calvinist faith. Calvinism, started by John Calvin, a guy who's from France, moved to Switzerland. Eventually his faith makes it back to France. And we see Calvinism really spring up in the south of France, the west of France, and those French Calvinists are known as Huguenots. Just like the Scottish Calvinists are known as Presbyterians, the English Calvinists are known as Puritans. We do see the Huguenots become popular. They're mostly based in cities and towns, not necessarily Paris, but other towns and cities throughout France, throughout the kingdom. You even see royal houses, nobles, pick up the Calvinist faith. Again, this is kind of what we saw in the Holy Roman Empire. When some nobles in the Holy Roman Empire became Lutheran to stand up to their emperor, we're going to see some French nobles become Huguenots to stand up to their French king or their French monarch. So this is going to be a trend among people who like Protestant faith. You can stand up to your noble and become more dominant if you adopt a Protestant religion. You can not only protest the Catholic Church, you can also protest your king by becoming a Protestant. And the main family that does this, the main noble family, are the Bourbons, or the Bourbon, whatever you want to call them. The Bourbons, they were next in line to the French monarchy. The current rulers were the Valois, but the next in line were the Bourbons, and they were rulers of Navarre, which is in what is today like southwestern France, northern Spain, kind of in that region. It doesn't really exist today. France is still incredibly Catholic across Paris, across most of the country. But as the century goes on, as the 1500s go on, we do see pockets of Calvinism and Huguenots rise up across some of the cities and towns across the nation. Things really break down in 1559. The current monarch, Henry II, dies in a joust. He was engaged to Catherine de' Medici, and actually they become married. I shouldn't say engaged. They got married right prior to this. So they get married. A few years later, we see Henry die in a joust. He survives, but then he gets really sick and infected, I think, and dies pretty much quickly after that. They do have some sons, some successors, but they are too young to rule. In fact, I think the next in line, Francis, he was engaged to Mary, Queen of Scots, who was the Scottish Catholic. So this Catholic family was engaged to the Scottish Catholic family, perhaps plotting, an attack against the Elizabeth I, who was the Protestant English monarch at the time. Who could say? That's not really a prerogative in AP era, but maybe it did happen. Catherine de' Medici, of course, you might recognize her name. She's the family of the Italian de' Medicis, so she comes from Italy, super Catholic, super, patrons to the Renaissance and fans of art and things like that. She's also famous for bringing, ballet to France. It's been said. She also had a very, a group of spies called the Flying Squadron, which were like women spies that seduced men and gathered secrets and reported back to her. She's really infamous. There's lots of TV shows and books and stuff about her. So Catherine de' Medici, again, being a de' Medici, she's from Italy, very Catholic, and of course, being the French monarch, she's very Catholic as well. She more or less rules France for the next couple of decades while her kids are young and while there's a succession crisis, because her son does die at a relatively young age, and we see conflicts come about between the ruling Valois and the other families. So you have the Protestant Bourbons. They are, waiting in the wings to take up the French monarchy. You also have the super Catholic Guise family. They hate the Huguenots. They're headquartered in Paris, and they have a strong support with the Catholic League and Catholics across Europe. The Valois are very Catholic as well, but they're ruling, and they don't want to cause, undue violence and chaos. So we do see in 1562 the Guise family massacre peaceful Huguenots, which angers the Bourbons, who are Huguenots. So we see people fight amongst each other, with the Guise and the Bourbons fighting each other, and the Valois getting involved here and there. To bring the peace, though, we see a marriage proposal. We see the ruling leader of the Bourbon family, Henry of Navarre. He is betrothed to the sister of the French king. I believe her name was Margaret, but I could be wrong. It doesn't really matter what her name is. So we're going to have a peace offering, marrying the Bourbons to the Valois, and this could maybe make a peaceful ceremony and bring these two families together. Even though the religions are different, this could mean a peaceful offering. So as the wedding gets kind of prepared and Paris gets ready, they decide to hold the wedding in Paris. And eventually this could maybe bring an end to some of this chaos that we see in France in the 1560s. So lots of Huguenots travel to Paris. They travel north to Paris in large numbers. However, unbeknownst to them, the Guise family, the super Catholic family, are in the ears of Catherine de' Medici. And they're plotting with her to maybe do some violence, which is exactly what happened. On October 24th, as the wedding is underway, this big celebration, we see the King's Guard, which again were controlled by the regent, Catherine de' Medici. We see the King's Guard murder Huguenot leaders, in waves of violence break out in Paris, with Catholic mobs massacring Huguenots. in large amounts. It starts in Paris and then spreads throughout parts of the countryside. And this becomes known as St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, just large amounts of violence and treachery. Again, let's review a few topics. Number one, this is an example of a Machiavellian tactic. Catherine de' Medici, a woman potentially seen as weak, saw religious disunity, and she was persuaded by the Guise family to make a Machiavellian maneuver to keep her country secure from this outside threat, which were the Calvinists, which were the Huguenots. They were not a French religion. They were a foreign religion, and she saw them as a threat. Number two, this family was getting in with her family. The Bourbons were getting in with the Valois and undermining her position. So in order to kind of keep her position secure, she felt that this massacre was necessary. Now, it wasn't incredibly successful. You do see Prince Henry, who was betrothed to the Valois family's daughter, he survives. He escapes with his life. And that leads to an even bigger war. So this Machiavellian tactic was not successful. This then leads us to one of the most confusing wars in this class, the War of the Three Henrys. And I know you're already thinking, like, I don't know all these names and numbers. It's okay. Don't really worry about it too much. The Bourbon, the Protestant Huguenot family, they were led by Henry of Navarre. The Valois leader was led by Henry III, who's the son of Catherine de' Medici. And then we have the Guise leader, Henry, Duke of Guise, who's another noble family. So these three groups fought each other for the French throne. St. Bartholomew's Massacre, St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre was not too successful. So what do we see happen? Henry III, who was the Valois leader, he assassinates Henry, Duke of Guise. They kind of feel like they were maybe betrayed and misled into doing this St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. So we see the Guise Henry taken out by the Valois leader, the current ruling family. But then he is taken out himself by a Catholic monk who was super into Catholicism, of course, and wanted revenge for this assassination of a super Catholic Henry, Duke of Guise, because again, they are from the Guise family who are super Catholic. This leaves one Henry left, Henry of Navarre, who becomes the next king, Henry IV of France. And he decides that, as he said, Paris is worth a mass. And while the Calvinists were not big on Catholic mass, he decides to convert to Catholicism in 1594. The French nobility, the French rulers at the time, the upper crust of French society, they were not willing to accept a Protestant Huguenot king. So Henry IV leaves his faith behind, converts to Catholicism, says Paris is worth a mass, and becomes Henry IV. But pretty much right after that, in order to kind of bring peace and stability into his realm, he issues the Edict of Nantes, which you do need to know that term. I see it pop up all the time. It's important now and it'll be important later. But the Edict of Nantes gave some protection and some religious toleration to the Huguenots, saying if you're a Huguenot, you can live within France's boundaries. You can live within Catholic France and live in certain towns and cities. And better yet, we'll give you some fortifications and protections. We'll give you some walls and allow you to build up your own militias in order to protect yourself in case there's another St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. So while this seems like a smart move, and it is an example of a politically moderate move, because Henry IV is one of probably the best example of a politique, those moderates that kind of made practical religious decisions that didn't try to alienate too many people. He does make this decision to kind of bring stability and end the chaos within France. However, if you're a strong king and you follow the likes of Machiavelli, or maybe King Louis XIV, who's coming up in the next unit, this is going to be a problem for you. These Huguenots are made up of the nobility. They're having their own armies, and they could become a state within a state. They could become a little state that you're going to have to go to war with if they get too much money and power. So while Henry IV tried to be a practical guy to offer some protection and reassurance to the Huguenots of France, it's going to maybe lead to some problems for him and maybe future kings. Unfortunately, Henry IV does get assassinated as well in the early 1600s, and this leads his son, Louis XIII to become the next king. Not Louis XIV, the Sun King, but Louis XIII becomes the next monarch. But this family, the Bourbon family, they rule France for centuries, until the 1800s, you could say, even after the French Revolution. And we'll talk more about them. King Louis XIV, the Sun King, for example, is from this Bourbon family. So let's move on. And here's where Navarre is. Here's a very famous illustration of St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. You can see Catherine de Medici here in her widow's dress, observing the slaughter of the Huguenots in Paris by the Catholics. Lots of violence again, very similar to this painting, right? This was make-believe, fantasy almost. This is reality. This actually happened. And there's lots of paintings about this massacre. Here's a defenestration. Last topic for today is Spain and the Netherlands. We've already talked about this guy, Philip II. If you remember, he is the son of Charles V, that Habsburg/Spanish emperor who was the heir to this gigantic empire, who let it fall apart because of Martin Luther and because he was trying to do too much, in my opinion. But Philip II is another example of someone who was very hell-bent on spreading religion, just like his father. He wanted to pick up the pieces of the empire that his father left behind. Remember, after his father abdicated, he got the Spanish part, so he got the whole New World Empire, and he got the Netherlands, and he got Spain, and I believe maybe parts of Italy too, but I'm not sure. But he got lots of power and money from all the Spanish gold from the New World, but also from his conquests in Europe. And he was a militant guy. He was for spreading the Catholic faith by using an army, and the Roman Catholic Church loved him for this. He is a new monarch as well. He is all about centralization, just like his grandparents, great-grandparents, the Ferdinand and Isabella. But maybe one of his faults was that he was a micromanager. He was too involved and didn't let his advisors and his government officials do their job because he interfered too much. He is one of the biggest supporters in Europe of Catholic nations. So kingdoms, the church that were Catholic, he would give them financial aid. He would give them military support and do what he can. He married Mary I in England to help support her. He tried to make England Catholic, and after that fails as well, he turns his attention to the Netherlands. The Netherlands are going to be a big thorn in his side, and they latch onto Lutheranism, but particularly Calvinism. Some of those Puritan ideas become really popular in the Netherlands. So let's kind of see what he does in this period. So again, these are the lands that Philip II owned in this period. Anything that's colored here. There is an area that's marked in red, though, which becomes a big topic for him, a big focus of his attention. That's the Netherlands. They start to rebel from Spain and from Philip II in this period. So let's look at that. So if you look here, let's go back real quick. You have the northern provinces up here of the Netherlands, and you have the southern Flemish provinces down here. The northern provinces are Germanic, or known as Dutch, and the southern provinces are somewhat Germanic, but more closer to French. Today, you would call this area Belgium. Today, you call this area the Netherlands, or the Dutch people. So all religions were relatively accepted in the Netherlands in the northern part. Lutheranism, Calvinism, Catholicism. You even see some Anabaptists up there. Again, they're kind of hated and persecuted, but you do see pockets of them here and there. But the Dutch are becoming very, very wealthy in this period. You see lots of Spanish shipbuilding in this region. These ships are going to the New World. So these Dutch people are becoming really knowledgeable about how to travel. And we're eventually going to see the Dutch kick out the Portuguese from their global trade route that they have established to get spices and stuff from Asia, slaves in Africa, sugar in the New World. The Dutch are going to really pick up on this as well. And the Dutch are going to gain more and more wealth. And they're very ingenious in this period and when coming up with ways to get land and to farm and to really bolster their economy. As the Reformation picks up in the 1500s, and as the Dutch get more and more prosperous, we're going to see them really latch on to religious toleration and freedom. They latch onto this idea of the Protestant work ethic. They latch onto this idea of religious tolerance and Calvinism. And we're going to see them really dislike how Catholic the Spanish are. But we're going to see both this kind of lead to a conflict between the Spanish Empire and then the Dutch. As Philip picks up his campaigns of conquest against non-Catholic nobles across Europe, within Spain's lands, and with other parts of Europe, he's going to start to tax the Dutch more and more and more. The Dutch, again, are making lots of money, bringing in the gold and all that cash. Philip wants a piece of that to fund his wars, to fund his attacks on the English, for example, and to build up his armada in 1588. So we start to see Philip starting to persecute Calvinist leaders in the Netherlands. Again, they are not Catholic, they are Calvinist, and again, they're these higher ups, these nobles in society, and they're, again, standing up to a Catholic leader by adopting a Protestant faith. Again, another trend. We saw in the Holy Roman Empire with the Lutheran nobles. We saw this in France with the Huguenot nobles, with the Bourbons, and now we're seeing it in the Netherlands. So we see this conflict between these Calvinist leaders and by this Philip II's Spanish army, who are also Catholic. We see instances of iconoclasm in which the Dutch will just destroy Catholic churches and either burn them down or take out all the art and destroy all the art and the statues. We then see more repression by the Spanish, more taxes and things like that, until the Dutch get more organized and officially begin a rebellion under their leader, William the Silent, Prince of Orange. He's not Prince of the color orange, he's Prince of a part of the Netherlands called the Orange. And if you ever watch, soccer, the Dutch team's always orange, and it comes from, this symbol of resistance to the Spanish. This house, who are named after they have the same name as the color orange. That kind of pushes the Dutch to kind of adopt that as their national color as they get more made into a nation state. So this rebellion pushes all of the northern provinces together, and we see all of them unified for a second. We even see the southern provinces kind of join in on the fun too. However, after a few years, we do see the southern provinces leave because they're too tied to the Catholic faith. They can't leave their Catholic faith behind. They don't feel like getting in with this Calvinist organization that the northern provinces are pushing. So William the Silent kind of leaves the southern provinces behind. And again, if we go back to this map, southern provinces are the Catholic region, the northern provinces are the Calvinist Dutch region. So we see the northern provinces organize into the Union of Utrecht, in which they decide to become a Protestant tolerant republic, which is kind of unheard of in this point in time in the late 15, early 1600s. And we see this develop into an 80-year conflict, 80 years of conflict between the Spanish and the Dutch, in which the Dutch, they appreciate mercantilism, they appreciate religious toleration, and they appreciate some political representation for the nobles, where they don't have necessarily a king leading them in this period, but more or less a group of merchants and nobles that kind of run their society. But again, this leads on for a number of years, and it's incredibly chaotic. William the Silent, the guy who organized this union, gets assassinated in 1584, but this conflict will drag on until the end of the 30 Years' War, which is our next topic. So I'll see you in a little bit to learn about the 30 Years' War.